It's my privilege to introduce to you all Reza Pahlavi, who is the exiled Crown Prince of Iran, now the founder and leader of the National Council of Iran, and he's allowed me to address him by his first name, so Reza, I can say thank you for coming in.
Thank you, Nick.
I want to hear about the National Council of Iran, but it strikes me first, Reza, many of my listeners will not be familiar with what happened in your homeland and why you are in exile. Do you mind awfully just talking my listeners through what happened?
Well, it was right after I graduated from high school where I was supposed to undergo pilot training in Reese Air Force Base in Lubbock, Texas in the United States and return to my homeland a year after. But smack in the middle of it, the revolution happened. And as a result, I ever since was forced to live in exile.
When you look at your homeland now, what do you feel in your heart?
I feel a nation that deserves better than what they have. We are dealing with an evil regime that 45 years ago took, first and foremost, the Iranian people hostage. And the way you look at the scene on the planet right now, especially in the region, it is the root cause of every problem we see, from radicalism to instability to conflict, basically warmongers who have put our region in the state in which it is right now.
What do you think their ultimate aim is, Reza?
Exporting an ideology. That's what they're there for. That's the whole purpose and existence of this regime. From the day one, they never cared about the people and the welfare of our citizens, but only to propagate this ideology in the region and beyond.
Give my listeners, if you would, sir, an idea of Iran, the size of the country, the population, what it's rich in, what its potential could be.
Well, huge potentials, but more than its potentials in terms of resources and both human and natural, which it does have, it's the contribution that a democratic, secular Iran could have in terms of peace with the region, whether with Israel or the Arab countries, as opposed to a regime that is antagonistic and, as I said, is the root cause of all the elements of instability and terrorism that we have witnessed over the past 4 decades.
Tell the listeners a little more of you doing with the National Council of Iran. Why have you established that, and what is your goal?
That was approximately 12 or so years ago, and since then there have been other activities and other movements, both at home and abroad. The whole objective is for the secular democratic opposition to be able to be as united as possible on a common goal. We believe that the transition to a secular democratic regime can only occur once this regime is gone, but that process has to be coordinated and well managed. I've stepped forward to lead this movement and assist our compatriots to do that. And what we're thinking, and of course that's where we need a lot of support from the free world, is to empower the people of Iran, because as is, they have so far fought the fight totally without any help. The regime is vulnerable, it is weak. As a result, it is cracking down even more. It has launched a campaign against women. It has right now people in prison to be executed. Tumaj Salehi, for instance, is one of our most famous rap artists that is undergoing that threat. We have one of the famous movie directors who is condemned to 8 years in prison and lashes just because he has made a movie so-called against national security. And I'm glad that artists are standing up and voicing it out. We need to have that solidarity.
Look, you're far closer than I, but what makes you think there's vulnerability, Reza?
Vulnerability in the sense that when you lose total legitimacy, and the majority of the Iranian people don't want this regime.
How do you know that?
It's polling, social media, testimonies by people.
It must be very dangerous to oppose the government there.
Well, of course. I mean, but, when you are fighting for liberty, you take all the risks. I think movements around the world had to face dictatorial regimes from the Soviet Union to other regimes, and Iran is no exception in that sense. But that's where I think your listeners would be interested to know that unlike this regime that is there to provide hatred and antagonism, Iranians want to live in a free world. They share the very same values of liberty, of human rights, of justice, of equality, of non-discrimination of any form. And that's where you have a natural ally that can be the difference, as opposed to a regime that is going in the direction of nuclearization, weaponization, and then what do we do?
And who are the allies that could help you bring about your 5-point plan? Who are you looking to for assistance?
I believe that in the area where we need to empower the Iranian people, and I always argue that it's understood why it is important to impose sanctions on such regimes, but sanctions in and of itself is not sufficient to bring about fundamental change unless you have an element of maximum support for those people. And I must say that until now, in the last 4 decades, the pursuit of behavior change was the premise of most governments, or appeasement, which has proven to be the wrong path because it only empowers a regime and emboldens it to do even more of what it has done, whether it is repression at home or aggression abroad. Therefore, the only solution is when we know that the root cause is linked to the regime, and it's going to be only with the disappearance of this regime that will put a final end to the problem. But then you have to bring in that support because people need to have added incentive knowing that they are not alone in this fight.
Should G20 governments be doing more?
I think they should understand that the best solution to put an end to the problem is to this time engage the people of Iran as opposed to the regime. They've tried it for 45 years. It hasn't panned out. I believe the time has come to help the Iranian people do that and basically have a totally different country in terms of its impact in the region as opposed to a regime that has raised havoc.
Lastly, you briefly touched on what seems to be the brutality of the Iranian regime, and we seem to see video of young women being effectively taken from the streets, put in the back of a van, and then sometimes beaten because they're not wearing the right... You're nodding your head, so this is a reality of everyday life for young women.
But the BBC made a timely documentary on the fate of Nika Shah-Karami, who was one of our young combatants who was literally taken in a truck, raped in that car, thrown somewhere, and, tale of too many similar stories. It is really, in this day and age, absolutely unconscionable that such a regime will have such kind of behavior against its own citizenry, and the world cannot remain silent any longer.
Well, thank you for including the studio on your trip to the country. I'm very grateful. Reza Pahlavi is the exiled Crown Prince of Iran, the eldest son of the last Shah of Iran. And there's more details with the National Council of Iran, of which he's the founder and leader. Thank you for your time coming by the studio.
Thank
Reza,
you, Nick.
Happy landings upon your return.